New York, the land of freedom and opportunity, has become a harder place to live than ever, especially for the elderly, retired workers, and even the veterans who once wore the uniform for the Stars and Stripes. A nation that always preaches about freedom, human rights, and human dignity. But, right in the heart of one of the wealthiest cities in America, hundreds of thousands of people wander the streets without a place to call home, forgotten by society, living on the edge as if they had never existed. And the scariest thing is not that they are homeless, but the way an entire system operates, where the most vulnerable always bear the highest cost. In this video, let's step into the heart of America together, where the dazzling light is not enough to dispel the dark corners, where untold truths exist, and perhaps no one wants you to know about. Get ready, because what you're about to see is not just their story, but it could also be a silent warning about a near future that might happen to us. As usual, this is not a negative statement or an intentional attempt to cause panic. We share perspectives from an analytical viewpoint and reflect from various sources, with the aim of helping the community raise awareness and prepare better, not in panic, but proactively. Are you ready to step into the list? Let's start with the journey of exploration. New York, the most glamorous city in all of America, where the Statue of Liberty holds high her torch, shining brightly in the ocean of hope, where millions dream of a full, luxurious American dream. But today, you only need to step down at a subway station in Manhattan or cross the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset to encounter hundreds of people sleeping on benches, huddled under the bridge, or curled up on the sidewalk because they can no longer afford a roof over their heads. According to the latest statistics from the Coalition for the Homeless, as of the beginning of this year, New York has more than 350,000 people without a fixed place of residence. Each night, only about 1/3 of them get to sleep in shelters, while thousands of others, including the elderly, have to wander the streets, rely on acquaintances, or temporarily live in their cars. Notably, 71% of those living in shelters are families. Not just unemployed men or those struggling with personal issues, as the old stereotypes suggest, but also school-aged children, single mothers, and elderly men and women who have paid taxes their entire lives, now crammed into cramped, crowded, and sometimes unsafe shelters. A rate that sends shivers down one's spine, especially since it doesn't only happen in little-known slums. It happens everywhere, from the dilapidated buildings in the Bronx to the neighborhoods that were once symbols of prosperity, like Chelsea or Williamsburg. Shabby tents have sprung up along the sidewalks, the stench of garbage and urine rising pungently, creating a chaotic and haunting scene, right in the heart of one of the wealthiest cities in the world. No one wants to believe that Central Park, once a symbol of peace and greenery in New York, now has elderly people lying on newspapers under the trees. Or that Times Square, where LED lights shine brightly day and night, now has veterans quietly ask for pieces of bread amid the bustling crowds. But that's the truth. New York today is facing a silent crisis, where the homeless are no longer a minority, but have become silent specters weaving through every corner of the city. But what has caused tens of thousands of people in New York to be pushed to the fringes of society, right in the heart of one of the wealthiest cities in the world? Could it be that there are interest groups quietly maintaining this instability as an industry? Is it possible that in the so-called city that never sleeps, there are people who will never again dream of a peaceful sleep? Homeless people are no longer the distant images you only encounter in movies or the news. They could be the woman who used to be the librarian at the library near your home, or the veteran who once guarded the flag you hang in front of your house. They once had names, ages, and homes to return to, until an unexpected event took everything away. Lydia, 78 years old, has been homeless and wandering in New York for over 40 years. She used to live in a small apartment with a rent-controlled lease. But when the person whose name was on the lease left, Lydia no longer had the legal right to stay. She was kicked out, unable to manage. Although she qualified for Social Security benefits over 40 years ago due to health reasons, Lydia could not retrieve her old medical records to sue in court, and thus a door closed, never to open again. Now, for Lydia, each day is simply a matter of existing.
Well, no matter where I live, I'm a square peg and this is a round hole. So no matter where I live, I don't fit.
She has spent more than half of her life wandering the streets. She doesn't want to leave this place because no matter where she goes, she feels lost, like she doesn't belong anywhere. No hope, no dreams, no plans. When asked about dreams, she bluntly replied, "Dreams are an illusion. You live in the present. Eat what you have. Wear what you have. Spend what you have. What is the point of dreaming?" For her, dreaming is now a privilege reserved for those who still have a home to return to. But Lydia is not the only one facing such circumstances. Gerald, a veteran who once served in the US military, now also lives on the streets. He no longer doubts the reason he is here, not because of failure, but because he chose ethics over compromise. But no matter the reason, life out there is still brutal.
Because it's never easy out here. Never.
Gerald has endured and survived many battles, but he still has to admit that surviving on the streets in the heart of New York is not easy. People can endure the cold, overcome hunger, but it's not easy to withstand the disdainful gaze of society.
People are cruel. People are insulted. They want to hurt you.
For people like Gerald, the harshness doesn't just come from the weather or inconvenience, but from the people themselves, from the way they are treated as if they are no longer part of this society. If even someone who fought for the country, someone who worked their whole life, can still fall to the bottom of society, then who among us is safe? A medical bill, a trip, a layoff, just one of those things happening, and you could find yourself in the same position as Lydia or Gerald, standing on the outskirts of the city that used to be your home. And that's one of the things that they don't want you to know, that homelessness is not a problem of them, but a reality that is approaching us. The longer you look, the more you realize those faces on the street are not strangers. They could be you, just sooner or later. Is it time to look deeper into the mechanisms, policies, and interests that are leaving thousands of people behind in a wealthy city like New York? Manhattan, home to Wall Street, Central Park, Broadway, and skyscrapers that have awed the entire world. It's no exaggeration to say that Manhattan is the economic and cultural heart of America, the dream destination for millions of people on this planet. But behind the shimmering neon lights, next to the luxurious Louis Vuitton and Apple store, and amidst the world's most bustling city that never sleeps, there are thousands of people who don't know where they will sleep tonight.
Fortunately, it's like no matter where you go to sleep, you're always ended up getting woken up, so on and so forth.
Manhattan currently has the highest density of homeless people in all of New York City. In areas like Midtown or the Lower East Side, you don't need to go far to see the reality. Just step out of a luxury hotel or a major subway station, and you'll encounter shabby shanties made of tarpaulin with the smell of garbage and waste wafting everywhere. In Manhattan, the sidewalks are no longer places to walk. It has become a public bed for those who have nowhere to go, whom society has unconsciously chosen to forget. It's ironic that Manhattan has everything, yet it lacks a safe place to sleep for the most vulnerable. If even Manhattan, the wealthiest and most developed place, allows tens of thousands of people to live on the streets, then what is really happening to New York? Is it possible that behind those dazzling lights lies a darkness greater than all, where people are replaced by profit and the existence of the poor is seen as a stain to be hidden rather than a warning to be faced? You won't believe this. The average rent in Manhattan has now surpassed $6,000 per month. An unimaginable figure for those living on pensions, minimum wage, or anyone trying to get by in this uncertain era. An apartment here can cost 3 to 4 times more than in other major cities like Chicago, Houston, or Philadelphia. But the irony is that they are neither larger nor better to live in. There was a time when affordable housing was the foundation of New York. In neighborhoods like the Bronx, Harlem, or Queens, rental apartments priced between $800 and $1,200 per month used to be stable homes for workers, retirees, and new immigrants, the people who built the soul and vitality of this city. But now, it all seems to be just a memory. In recent years, New York has lost more than 400,000 affordable apartments. That number not only represents lost assets, but also hundreds of thousands of people forced to leave the neighborhoods they once called home. This process does not happen randomly. The old buildings are bought by investors, demolished, and then replaced with luxury high-rises or upscale rental apartments. Those who have lived in one place their entire lives now have to choose between paying rent 3 times their income or leaving quietly. Instead of protecting the residents, the policy is complicit in the wave of erasing affordable housing. The city offers tax incentives to real estate developers, while there are not enough controls in place to retain apartments for low-income individuals. The expansion of low-income housing is happening too slowly, too little, and not keeping pace with the rate at which old apartments are being consumed. Rent control programs, once a lifeline for hundreds of thousands of renters, are increasingly being narrowed, weakened, or overlooked. If a city no longer has a place for the people who built it, then in the end, who does New York exist for? Everything you just watched is not a sentimental viewpoint or personal speculation. This is a compilation and analysis from various official reports, public data, and real stories recorded right on the streets of New York. What do you think? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. If you lived in New York just a few years ago, you wouldn't believe the current prices. A loaf of bread that used to cost less than $5 now can set you back nearly $20 for a simple breakfast at a modest diner. Not a fancy restaurant, not special service, just a breakfast to start the day like everyone else. And a gallon of milk? Almost equal to an hour of your hard work. So, what about a dozen eggs? Reaching the threshold of luxury if you live on a pension. New York City is currently holding an unwanted position. The city with the highest cost of living in the United States. According to reports from Numbeo and Bloomberg, this city has surpassed even San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. in terms of average per capita spending. And it's not just a small group that is affected. From blue-collar workers to retirees, and even the middle class, everyone is struggling under the weight of rising prices. The average increase in essential goods has exceeded 75 to 90% in less than a decade. Meanwhile, the income of those living on Social Security benefits or pensions has only increased by less than 25%. This is no longer inflation. It is a silent but brutal culling. The poor are being pushed out of the city centre, while the middle class is increasingly teetering on the fragile line between having a home and being homeless. If I lived here, going to the doctor would no longer be about healthcare. It has gradually turned into a new fear. Perhaps after holding the medical bill, the first thing I would do is pack my suitcase and leave my cozy room. Not because I'm afraid of getting sick, but because a simple checkup can cost hundreds of dollars, enough to blow the entire month's budget. Even when living as frugally as possible, an elderly person in New York still has to spend $1,200 to $1,500 each month just to maintain basic needs like electricity, water, gas, internet, transportation, and food, not including rent. The elderly, the disabled, the unemployed, or simply those who cannot keep up with the insane cost of living in New York, all are being pushed out of the system. While rent in Manhattan can reach $6,000 a month for just a one-bedroom apartment, tens of thousands of people are trying to get by on less than $10. A quick meal on Fifth Avenue can cost as much as a homeless person's entire weekly food budget. Living in New York, in many cases, feels like you're being taxed just for wanting to be near your old community, familiar hospitals, or lifelong memories. And that's something not everyone is willing to admit. But I am here to recount, from public data, street stories, to the very people living on the edge of a city that is no longer as tolerant as before. If even a simple breakfast has become a luxury, how can people dare to dream of a stable life? Have you ever been curious about the strange structures of benches in parks or at train stations? That is hostile architecture, a measure that America is using to erase the homeless from society's view. You might encounter sharp metal spikes running along the walls of a public garden. The cold steel ridges are intricately installed along the edges of the low walls of newly built buildings. Or the long benches in Central Park, which used to be resting spots for everyone, have now been replaced with anti-lying chairs, with fixed armrests, inconvenient angles, or divided into separate seating areas. Hostile architecture is not an abstract concept, but rather an urban design system aimed at preventing people from using public spaces in undesirable ways. Specifically, it prevents homeless people from sleeping, resting, stopping, or simply existing for too long in places where they are not welcome. For those who have lost their homes, public spaces are the only places left for them to rest, even if just for a few hours in the cold night. But instead of being supported, they are quietly excluded. Not by a ban, not by warning, but with cold steel, sharp spikes, and invisibility. There are no screams, only indifferent designs that leave them with nowhere to sit, lie down, or be considered human. Supporters of this type of architecture offer reasons that sound reasonable: maintaining cleanliness, reducing crime, ensuring public safety. But when we look deeper, we are forced to ask, safe for whom? Who really needs to be protected? And who is being pushed out of sight, out of memory, and even out of social existence? Because there is a frightening thing happening quietly. We are not only indifferent to the homeless, but we are also trying to make them disappear, not by helping them, but by pushing them out of sight. A civilized city is not one where there are no poor people, but one where the poor are not pushed out of sight by iron fences, sharp spikes embedded in benches, or anti-lying designs disguised under the guise of urban aesthetics. Is the light from the city street lamps still enough to keep warm and bright enough for a person huddling on the street to know that they are still seen and still recognized as a human being? So, is it too late to save New York? Is it too late for this city to become a place where everyone, not just the rich, not just the lucky, can exist with dignity? New York City is spending more than $4 billion each year to address the homelessness crisis. A staggering amount that would make any city in the world take notice. But the paradox is, the homelessness crisis has not abated. This raises many questions for people. Where has that money gone? Is the unfortunate fate of those who have nowhere to return to gradually turning into an industry for some to profit from? Urban development policies still prioritize profit over people. Luxury housing complexes continue to rise, while thousands of elderly, sick, and low-income workers cannot find a safe shelter for tonight. The essence of the problem has gradually shifted away from the budget. However, there are still ongoing efforts, from building low-income housing, improving shelters, to collaborative programs between the city and community organizations. But if the pace doesn't keep up with the problem, then for every affordable apartment completed, perhaps 10 more people are pushed out of their old homes. After all, people don't become homeless by choice. They fall into it because of a complex system that makes keeping a roof over their heads a luxury. It's not just money that we lack. We lack something simpler: willpower. I believe in the will to stop treating crisis management like a business, the will to put people before numbers, and the will to accept that sometimes saving a city doesn't come from grand plans, but from stopping turning our backs on the weakest. We are living in the heart of a magnificent city, where the dazzling lights can make one forget that just a few steps away, thousands of people are huddled in the darkness. They were once workers, veterans, taxpayers, pieces of America that once prided itself on being the promised land. But now, they have been erased from the picture of the American dream simply because they can no longer afford to survive. If a society is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable, then where are we headed? When an elderly person has to choose between a full meal and paying for medicine, when a makeshift shelter becomes a dream, does civilization still hold any meaning? The sad thing is that none of us are truly immune to that situation. An incident, an emergency bill, a job loss, is enough to turn them into us. And perhaps this is what many people don't want you to know, that the homelessness crisis in New York is not just a social phenomenon, but a mirror reflecting the very fractures in how we build and operate a city, a country. What do you think about this issue? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated with our latest videos. Thank you for watching and see you in the next part. Please note, the information in this video is compiled from reliable sources and public reports, aiming to analyze and provide a reference perspective. The video is not intended to incite panic, criticize individuals, or provide financial or legal advice. Viewers should consider and verify additional information related to their personal circumstances before making any decisions.